Hello, everyone. I'm Ted, and I would like to welcome you to the San Diego-based International Ramana Maharshi Study Group. And today, as we do on the first Sundays of every month, we are very pleased to bring you the following 2 hours with our monthly question and answer program with Michael James. This well-known scholar, author, and lecturer from the UK has been a longtime follower of Sri Ramana Maharshi, and he's been a longtime guest on this program. Michael, a warm San Diego welcome to you. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Very good. If people are watching, perhaps this is a recording of this program on YouTube, which Michael is quick to post every month. And if you would like to join us live on these first Sundays, you're invited to do so. Just email me. My name is Ted at newsguy55@aol.com, and I will put you on the list for the next group. And feel free also to join us for our Ramana study group meetings every other Sunday of the year at the same time, every Sunday but the first Sunday of each month. So Michael, let's get started. And I have a question for you, Michael, right off the top, with our first several questions today from Barath. And Michael, would you like me to read this one question at a time? There's 4 of them there, or all questions at once?
I suggest you read them all and then I'll go through them.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot here, as you know, because
Yes.
we discussed it on text.
Yeah.
Well, Barath begins by saying, when doing self-inquiry, Michael, I start with questioning, who am I? I say it aloud because that helps turn the attention to the questioner. In the process, I reach a state of heightened alertness where minute sounds around me appear to be amplified in this ocean of silence. Is this my awakeness?
My
Is this
awareness.
my awareness state? As I go on, I become more and more of my being. Like sleep, I feel I can continue to stay in this state for a longer time. And when I wake up from my practice, I feel like I just woke up from sleep. My mind is clear, speech is measured, and I'm in a rather heightened state of alertness. His next question will be, is this transition state common while practicing self-inquiry? How do I know when I am not stuck experiencing a meditative bliss and that this state was a glimpse of my own awareness? And then his third question, can thoughts appear while I am in my true awareness state without a thinker? And his final question is, Michael, sometimes I peek in to check if I am the awareness or the ego, thus becoming a seer or observer. How do I know I am the awareness and not the ego? Michael, over to you.
Okay. So I'll go through this sentence by sentence because there's a lot of things here that need clarifying. Firstly, when doing self-inquiry, it is not necessary to question who am I. We are investigating who am I, not merely asking the question, who am I? Asking the question is a mental activity, but what we are trying to investigate is our being. So thinking any words, or let alone saying any words out loud, is not well, occasionally it may remind us to turn our attention back to ourselves, but the questioning itself is not the self-investigation. Self-investigation means turning our attention away from all phenomena that appear and disappear, back towards ourself, the one to whom all these things appear and disappear. And having turned our attention back towards ourselves, then we try to hold on to that self-attentiveness. So Bhagavan has made it very clear what he means by Atma-vichara, self-investigation or self-inquiry as it's sometimes called, is nothing but being self-attentive. This is how we investigate what we actually are. We can investigate ourselves, so to speak, only by observing ourselves, by attending to ourselves. This is what is meant by self-investigation. So Bhagavan never said, ask who am I or question who am I. He said, investigate who am I. investigating who am I means turning our attention back to ourselves and trying to hold on to that self-attentiveness. In this, then he goes on to say, in this process, I reach a state of heightened alertness where minute sounds around me appear to be amplified in the ocean of silence. Is this my awareness state? This question, is this my awareness state, itself shows a lack of clear understanding of what Bhagavan's teachings are about. That is, awareness is our real nature. Awareness is what we always are. There's never a moment when we are not aware. We are aware in the waking state, we are aware in the dream state, we are aware in sleep. But the difference between waking and dream on the one hand and sleep on the other hand, in sleep we are aware of nothing other than I am. We are simply aware I am. In other words, we're aware of our own being. Whereas in waking and dream, we're also aware I am, but we're not just aware I am. Firstly, we are aware of ourselves not just as I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, I am this person. And being aware of ourselves as this person, we are also aware of the appearance of other things. So when we talk about awareness, we need to distinguish real awareness from awareness of phenomena. Real awareness is pure awareness. Pure awareness means awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. This is what Bhagavan called Sutatra Arivu. That means awareness. Well, Suttu literally means pointing out or showing. So the awareness that is not pointing out or showing anything. In other words, the awareness that is just aware of itself. This is what I usually translate in English as intransitive awareness. That is, transitive awareness means awareness of objects or phenomena. Intransitive awareness means pure awareness, awareness that is just aware without being aware of anything. So what we actually are is pure awareness. Awareness of anything, that which is aware of anything other than ourselves, is ego. So being aware of sounds or any phenomena of any kind is the nature of ego. That is, the nature of ego is to be constantly aware of things other than itself. We rise and stand as ego in waking and dream. And throughout the waking and dream states, we are aware of a constant stream of phenomena. This is what is sometimes referred to as I think it's called, is it the stream of consciousness or something, or the flow of consciousness or something? But it's not a stream of consciousness or a stream of it's not a stream of consciousness. It's just a stream of phenomena. I've forgotten what the word is. It's not stream of. I can't remember. But whatever it is just what we are aware of throughout the waking and dream state is a constant flow of ever-changing phenomena. That which is aware of these phenomena is ego. So this question, is this my awareness state? Every state is an awareness state, but what we need to distinguish is the state of pure awareness in which we are just aware, but not aware of anything. In other words, we're just aware, I am. Because we can't be aware without being aware, but we are aware. So being aware entails being aware of our being aware, I am. But in pure awareness, there is no awareness of anything other than ourselves. The state in which we're aware of anything other than ourselves, anything, any objects, any phenomena, anything that appears or disappears, anything that changes in any way, that that state of awareness is the ego state. It's the state, because that which is aware of things other than itself is only ego. Being aware of things other than ourselves is the very nature of ego. But our real nature is just being aware without being aware of anything. So when we are practicing self-investigation, we are trying to focus our entire attention on ourself alone. To the extent to which we attend to ourself, we thereby withdraw our attention from all other things. And the more our attention is focused on ourself, the less we will be aware of anything other than ourselves. So we do need to be in a state of heightened alertness or vigilance, but it's not alertness about other things, it's alertness about our own being. Then he goes on to say, as I go on, I become more aware of my being. Like sleep, I feel I can continue to stay in this state for a longer time. When I wake up from my practice, I feel like I just woke up from sleep. My mind is clear, speech is measured, and I'm in a heightened state of alertness. This description of what he experiences sounds very much like a state of Manolaya or a state close to Manolaya. This sounds like lulling oneself into a state of into a state in which we are neither clearly self-attentive, nor are we attending to other things. We just go into a sleep-like state. So his next question is this transition common while practicing self-inquiry? If we are practicing self-inquiry, we won't experience any state of Manolaya, as I'll explain a bit more after answering the next question. How do I know I'm not stuck in experiencing a meditative bliss and that the state was a glimpse of my awareness? Well, this does sound very much like a state of experiencing meditative bliss. I remember hearing that in one of Adi Shankara's songs, I can't remember which one, maybe it's Upadesh or something, I can't remember. But anyway, in one of his songs, Adi Shankara warns against the getting lulled into a blissful state. That is the blissful state that comes and goes is not the real bliss, which is our real nature. Manolaya is a state in which the mind subsides, but it's only temporary subsidence. So any state of subsidence of mind that is brought about by any means other than self-attentiveness is Manolaya. Of course, many people, when they're practicing meditation, they don't go completely into laya, but they subside into a very pleasant, blissful state, which is not entirely, the mind is not entirely dissolved, but it's just a blissful state. That is not what we are aiming for. Self-investigation means we are trying to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. So we're trying to focus our entire attention on ourselves alone. When we focus our attention on ourselves, if we are really attending to ourselves, we won't go into this sort of very pleasant sleep-like state. What happens when we attend to ourselves, of course, if we are fully mature and ready to surrender ourselves completely, when we focus our attention on ourselves, we will subside completely and dissolve back into our being. That is the state of manonasa. But that's the manonasa means complete annihilation of ourselves. That is, manolaya means a temporary dissolution of ego or mind. And whereas manonasa means destruction of ego or mind, in other words, permanent dissolution. So it's the permanent dissolution we are aiming for. Otherwise, there's no benefit in being in a state of manolaya. Every day we go into sleep. Sleep is a state of manolaya, but we come out of it without we don't make any spiritual progress in the state of Manolaya. So if we are practicing self-investigation correctly, trying to attend to ourselves, what will happen is we will find that vasanas are constantly rising, trying to draw our attention away from ourselves. This is because as ego, we can survive as ego only by uh, clinging to things other than ourselves. Bhagavan makes this clear in verse 25 of Ullajunapti, in which he makes clear that the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish, by attending to things other than itself, but to subside and dissolve back into its source by attending to itself. In that verse, he describes ego in the final line of the verse as Uruvatra Payahande. That means formless demon ego. Ego is formless because it has no form of its own. Having no form of its own means it has no separate existence of its own. So in its original formless state, ego is nothing but pure awareness. But it rises as ego by attaching itself to a form. So that's what he explains in that verse. He says in the first sentence, Urupatri undam. That means grasping form, it comes into existence. And what he means by that is, as soon as we rise as ego, we grasp form. He also makes it clear in the next verse that none of these forms exist independent of ego. What he means by form here is not just physical forms. He means any phenomenon of any kind whatsoever. That is, anything that can be distinguished from any other thing is a form or phenomenon or an object. So since ego is essentially formless, whatever forms it grasps are things other than itself. So what he implies by grasping form is attending to things other than ourselves. But those other things don't exist independent of ego. So as soon as we rise as ego, we project forms and grasp them. The first form we grasp as soon as we rise as ego is the form of a body. So as soon as we rise as ego, either when we wake up from sleep or when we begin to dream, we project a body and identify that body as I. So the first form we grasp is the form of a body. And what Bhagavan means by body is not just the physical form of the body, because we never experience a dead body as ourself. It's always a living body. And we never experience a sleeping body as ourself. It's always a body that seems to be awake. Even in dream, when the body we take to be ourselves seems to be awake, so long as we're in that state. So since it is a body that is living and awake, a living body means that it is not just the physical form of the body, but life also. The physical form of the body is what is called the Annamaya kosha. Annamaya kosha means the sheath composed of food. The life is called Pranamaya kosha, which means the sheath composed of life or breath. Prana means breath, but it also means more than breath. It's all the physiological processes that go on in the body. They all constitute the pranamaya kosha, or the sheath of life. And then since a body is a living body, the prana is also there. And because the body seems to be awake, functioning within that body, there is a mind, an intellect, and a will. These are respectively called the Manomaya kosha, the sheath composed of mind, the Vijnanamaya kosha, the sheath composed of intellect, and the Anandamaya kosha, the sheath composed of bliss. The sheath composed of bliss means the will, because our will is the basic desire that we all have is the desire to be happy. So, as Bhagavan explains in Nana, happiness alone is the cause of love. That is, we love whatever we think will make us happy. So, happiness and uh, love are very, very close. And so the will is called the chittam or the anandamaya kosha. It's also called the karana sarira, the causal body, because it's our will that gives rise to all other phenomena. So the body that we experience as I is not just the physical form of the body, it's all these five sheaths. That's why in verse 5 of Ulunapti, Bhagavan says, Udul Pancha Kosa Uru. That means the body is a form of five sheaths. Therefore, all five are included in the term body. So, as I say, the first form that ego projects and grasps as soon as it rises is the form of a body consisting of these five sheaths. And then in the next sentence, he says, Urupatri Nitkom. That means grasping form, it stands. Stands here means it endures. So ego rises, grasping form, it endures grasping form. So the basic form it grasps is the form of a body consisting of five sheaths. Then in the third sentence, he says, Urupatri undu mika ongum. That means grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. So the implication of these first three sentences is that we cannot rise, stand, or flourish as ego without constantly grasping form. But as soon as we rise, we grasp the form of a body as I. Throughout the waking and dream states, we continue to grasp that form as I. And we don't stop with just being aware of this body consisting of five sheaths. We are then constantly aware of other phenomena. So being aware of other phenomena is the food on which ego lives. And then he says, Uru Vittu Urupatram, leaving form it grasps form. Because the mind cannot stand for a moment without constantly grasping form, if it lets go of one form, it will grasp another form. But then he says, Tedinal otum pidicum. That means if literal meaning is if seeking, it will take flight. If seeking here means if ego seeks its own reality, if ego seeks to know who am I. In other words, if ego investigates itself, it will take flight. Take flight means it'll run away. That's a metaphorical way of saying ego will subside. So to the extent to which we attend to other things, we are feeding and nourishing ego. And so ego rises and flourishes. To the extent to which we attend to ourself, ego will subside. So when we are practicing self-investigation, unless we are willing to surrender ourselves completely and forever, when we try to attend to ourselves, so many vasanas, Vishaya vasanas, will rise. Vishaya vasanas means inclinations to attend to and to experience Vishayas. Vishayas means objects or phenomena. In other words, what Bhagavan refers to in that verse 25 of Ulunapadu as form are Vishayas, so objects or phenomena. So because ego depends for its very existence on constantly grasping phenomena, it has very strong inclinations to grasp phenomena. Those inclinations to grasp phenomena are what are called Vishaya vasanas. So if we are trying to attend to ourselves, this is like if we try to put our head underwater. We can keep our head underwater only for a certain length of time. After being underwater for a certain length of time, we become we have a very strong desire to take another breath. So we have a strong urge to rise up above the water and take breath. Likewise, when we attend to ourselves, we are depriving ego of the food or the oxygen on which it depends for its survival, namely being constantly aware of things other than itself. So if we are really attending to ourselves, we will find the vasanas will rise very strongly, trying to draw our attention away from ourselves towards other things. So if we feel we're in a pleasant sleep-like state, that is not self-attentiveness. Because if we were really attending to ourselves, there would definitely be the equal and opposite reaction of the vasanas rising, trying to draw our attention away from ourselves. So our aim in self-investigation is not to lull ourselves into a sleep-like state. That is of no use whatsoever. Our aim is to attend to ourselves. When we attend to ourselves, the vasanas will sprout in the form of thoughts, drawing our attention away from ourselves. Whenever, but vasanas are only inclinations. So we are not bound by our inclinations. We may have a strong inclination to think about other things, but we have the freedom to hold on to self-attentiveness if we want to. In practice, most of us, we don't have sufficient love to hold on to our being, so we're able to hold on for a short time, and then again, our attention gets carried away by the vasanas. In other words, our attention turns outwards towards other things. And when it turns outwards towards other things, what do we have to do? We simply have to turn it back to ourselves. As Bhagavan says, whatever thoughts appear, that everything, all phenomena are just thoughts. So whatever thoughts appear, it is necessary to vigilantly investigate to whom they have appeared. So when thoughts arise, to whom do these thoughts arise? Investigating to whom means turning our attention away from whatever appears back to ourselves, the one to whom it appears. And having turned our attention back to ourselves, we need to hold on to that self-attentiveness. And when we hold on to that self-attentiveness, the mind will subside, and whatever thought had arisen will also subside. This is what Bhagavan describes in the sixth paragraph of Nana. I'll just read some of the sentences in that sixth paragraph because they will. It makes this process very clear if we understand it correctly. That is, I won't read the Tamil, I'll just read the English meaning. He says, if other thoughts rise, that means if other thoughts means anything, a thought of anything other than ourselves arises. So if any objects or phenomena appear, without trying to complete them, it is necessary to investigate to whom they have appeared. However many thoughts rise, so what? In other words, we shouldn't be worried about the rising of thoughts. When thoughts rise, it should remind us to turn our attention back to ourselves. That's why he says, however many thoughts rise, so what? Because it's the nature of thoughts. They will constantly be rising. The more we try to attend to ourselves, the more thoughts will rise with ever more vigor. But he said we shouldn't worry about that. What we should do, he then explains, vigilantly, as soon as each thought emerges, if one investigates to whom it has occurred, it will be clear to me. In other words, when any thought appears, if we turn our attention away from a thought back towards ourselves, the one to whom the thought has appeared, it will be clear to me. So once that clarity, this all appearing to me, comes, we then need to hold on to it. That's what he implies in the next sentence when he says, if one investigates who am I, the mind will return to its birthplace. Its birthplace means the source from which it's risen, namely our own being. So investigating to whom means turning our attention away from whatever has appeared back towards ourselves, the one to whom it has appeared. And investigating who am I means having turned our attention back towards ourselves, we need to hold on to that self-attentiveness. That's why he says, if one investigates who am I, but if one investigates who am I, the mind will return to its birthplace. The thought that has risen will also cease. That is, the mind return to its birthplace means we subside back into our being. And since we're no longer attending to it, the thought that has risen will also cease. And then he says in the next sentence, and this is very, very important, when one practices and practices in this manner, for the mind, the power to stand firmly established in its birthplace increases. So he makes it very clear this is what we need to be practicing. It doesn't matter how many times our attention is diverted away from ourselves towards other things. We need to vigilantly turn it back to ourselves and try to hold on to self-attentiveness. And by practicing this manner, we gain the strength to stand firmly established in our birthplace. Our birthplace means our own being, the source from which we've risen. So this is the practice of self-investigation. So if we find we're just in a very pleasant, blissful, sleep-like state, that means we are not really attending to ourselves. We've just lulled ourselves into a very pleasant state. Who is experiencing this state? To whom did this pleasant state appear? We need to turn our attention back to ourselves. And when we turn our attention back to ourselves, inevitably, the vasanas will sprout in the form of thoughts. Inevitably. But when the vasanas sprout, we have a choice. Either we have a choice to follow those thoughts, or we have a choice to turn our attention back to ourselves and hold on to self-attentiveness. So if we turn our attention back towards ourselves and hold on to self-attentiveness, that is self-investigation. That is why this practice is sometimes described as, in the Upanishads, I think it's described as the razor's edge, because we are trying to stay balanced in a state between, on the one hand, falling asleep or falling into a sleep-like state, and on the other hand, getting carried away by thoughts. Both of these are what are called pramada. Pramada means negligence or inattentiveness. So when we are not vigilantly attending to ourselves, we can either slip into a sleep-like state, or we can get carried away by thoughts. So in order to avoid slipping into that sleep-like state or getting carried away by thoughts, we need to hold on to self-attentiveness. So if we are in a pleasant sleep-like state, that is not self-investigation. So we need to be trying more and more to attend to our own being. So the question, how do I know I'm not stuck experiencing a meditative bliss? Well, if we're in a meditative bliss, we're not practicing self-investigation, because in self-investigation, there is a constant battle going on between, on the one hand, the satvasana, the love just to be as we actually are, and on the other hand, all the vishaya vasanas. So self-investigation is not just being experiencing a state of meditative bliss. That is a state of Manolaya or semi-Manolaya. It is not the state, but it's not the state of self-attentiveness. Then the next question, can thoughts appear while I'm in my true awareness state without a thinker? Our true awareness state is the state of pure awareness. In the state of pure awareness, it's the state in which we're not aware of anything other than ourselves. So thoughts cannot appear in pure awareness. If they appear in pure awareness, we have slipped down from that state of pure awareness by rising as ego, because it's only in the view of ego that thoughts seem to exist. And the question also, he says, can thoughts appear while I'm in my true awareness state without a thinker? Without a thinker, how can thoughts appear? That is, thoughts, the appearance, the thinker is ego. Ego, that is, ego is constantly thinking. Thinking is a process of forming thoughts and being aware of them, because we form thoughts in our awareness. So the thinker or ego is the process of thinking is a process of forming thoughts in our awareness. So thoughts appear where? They appear only in our awareness. So that means that but it's not in the state of pure awareness that the thoughts appear. They appear only in that seeming awareness, that false awareness called ego. So if thoughts appear, that is a clear sign that we are not in the state of pure awareness. So whatever thoughts appear, we need to vigilantly investigate to whom they have appeared. That means we need to turn our attention away from whatever appears, back towards ourselves, the one to whom it appears. And then the final question is well, I think it's two questions actually. Sometimes I peek in to check if I'm the awareness of ego, thus becoming a seer or observer. Again, there's a lot of conceptual confusion here. When we talk about awareness or ego is itself a form of awareness, but it is not the real awareness. Ego is the false awareness, the awareness of phenomena. Being aware of phenomena is not real awareness, it's false awareness. Real awareness is only the fundamental awareness I am. That is pure awareness, awareness that is aware of nothing other than ourselves. So if we are aware of anything other than ourselves, we are not in a state of pure awareness. So if we peek in to check, the I that peeks in to check is itself ego. So it need not peek in to check, but the very fact that it has an inclination to peek in to check means that it is ego. Pure awareness would never have an inclination to peek in to check anything because it just is as it is. It never undergoes any change. It never has any inclination of any kind whatsoever. It's just pure awareness is pure being. Thus becoming a seer or observer, he says, that is, we become a seer or observer as soon as we rise as ego. So throughout the waking and dream state, we are the seer or observer. The seer or observer is ego. So we shouldn't, that is, as I say, ego is the seer or observer. So as Bhagavan says, as the seer, we need to see ourselves, the seer. As the observer, we need to observe ourselves, the observer. So we shouldn't be, we are a seer or observer only so long as we're attending to other things. If we, the seer, turn our attention back to see ourselves, we subside, cease to be the seer, and remain as pure being. And then finally, how do I know I'm the awareness and not the ego? Well, that is what I've been explaining from the beginning of the answer. We need to distinguish between real awareness, which is pure awareness, awareness of nothing other than I am, and awareness of other things. Awareness of other things is what is that which is aware of anything other than itself is ego. So what Bhagavan referred to as suttarivu, or transitive awareness, in other words, awareness of anything other than ourselves, that is ego. The pure awareness is not aware of anything other than ourselves. So if we are aware of nothing other than our own being, in other words, if we are just aware I am and not aware of anything else, that is the state of pure awareness, of real awareness. Otherwise, if we're aware of anything other than ourselves, we who are aware of that are ego. I don't know if the person who asked this question is
Barath
here.
is here. I see him. Barath, do you have any questions after that? It's
Yes,
pretty thorough. One of the best series of answers I think I've ever heard Michael give. What do you say,
thank you,
Barath?
Mike.
Very
Really,
good question. So
Yeah.
thank you. I have a follow-up to the answer that you gave me.
yeah,
I feel this practice is very, very subtle in that while I'm practicing, I might go through a certain awareness state, but while I'm describing, I might not come across as exactly as to what
yes,
I
yes,
experience.
that is
So,
true.
and I feel I have also misworded a few things here in my questioning,
Right.
and I want to get to the right understanding of what I went through so that I can
Okay.
practice properly. I think I misworded sleep-like state in that I did not fall into that state where, just like in sleep, but I had a stream of consciousness or a heightened alertness uh, during that state, but I describe it as a sleep-like state because there was no ego in the sense of a doer or a doership there. That was one. And possibly I've been miswording also the meditative bliss as a very heightened alert state as a meditative bliss. I don't know if one could call that. Um, but I think the central point there is been trying to understand um, is the heightened alertness state is a sign of the practice in the right direction, even if it were just to be a glimpse of it.
Alertness means being aware. Are
Yes.
you alert to the appearance of other things, or are you alert to your own being? To the extent to which you're alert to your own being, you will cease to be aware of other things. If you're aware of anything other than yourself, then that is a clear sign that you who are aware of those other things are ego. That is during the waking and dream state. Waking and dream states are a state of ego. There is never a moment in the waking or dream state when we are without ego. You say, I experience that state. To say I experience the state without ego, that is the I that experiences that state, which is supposedly without ego, is itself the ego that is supposedly absent there. So the very fact that we talk about a state and say we experienced it means that it's clear indication that ego is there. Can we say anything about the experience of sleep? We can only talk about the experience of sleep in negative terms. We can say we weren't aware of anything except I am. That's all we can say about it. We can't say, even to say I experience that, that is the I that is experiencing all of this waking and dream state is ego. But what remains in sleep is just the pure I. And the pure I never rises to say, I experienced, because that is knowing or experiencing anything other than ourselves is a mental activity. Whereas knowing or experiencing our own being is not a mental activity, it's a state of just being. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Upadeshundya, Tanai iritale, tanai aridalam. Being oneself alone is knowing oneself. So that is knowing ourselves is a knowing that is completely unlike any other type, knowing anything else. Because knowing anything other than ourselves is a mental activity, whereas knowing ourselves is a state of just being ourselves. There's no mental activity there at all.
I see. Makes sense.
As you say, it's very, very subtle. But even in that state, anything that we can talk about, the I that talks about that is ego.
I see.
That's why we need to go deeper and deeper within. So that's why we need to be, that's why Adi Shankara warns against getting lulled into a blissful state. That is not what we are seeking. If we've lulled into that state, we are not attending to ourselves. If we were attending to ourselves, we as ego would rebel against that state and try to grasp something in order to survive. So the self-investigation is a constant battle between our love to be as we actually are and our liking to attend to other things. And our liking to attend to other things is very strong because as ego, our very survival depends on that.
Yes. Okay.
Michael, we have 4 other questions here for you on this topic. Is it okay to ask those questions?
Yes, but Bharat, do you have anything else you want to ask on this?
I think I'm clear, Michael.
Right,
Thank you.
right.
Thank you, Bharat. And I agree. Great questions. And Sri Ram, I see your hand up. You're going to be the 4th person in line. There are 3 people ahead of you. I always take them in order.
Thank you, sir.
Melissa made a statement here. It is conventionally called stream of consciousness, but it is actually just a stream of thoughts appearing in the mind.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was trying to say. I just couldn't remember whether stream of consciousness is the right term for it.
And then Ronnie asks if ajata is the ultimate state, Michael, the I am is still there, or does it dissolve?
I am alone is what is real. I am is the only thing that is never born and therefore never dies. So I am is ajata. Ajata means a state in which there's no rising. So the state devoid of ego is the state of ajata. That is our real state.
Excellent. And then Lonnie has a question that's tangentially related to this. And she asks, in self-inquiry, who, what is inquiring, doing the inquiry in general? Who or what is doing the inquiring?
Ego. Only ego needs to do, that is, ego is a false awareness of ourself. As ego, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, I am this person. That is a false awareness of ourselves because this body or person is not what we actually are. So as ego, because we are aware of ourselves as something other than what we actually are, we need to investigate ourselves in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. So it is only self-investigation is necessary only for ego. And it is ego that does the self-investigation. And in the process of self-investigation, ego loses itself. That is, self-investigation is turning our attention back towards our own being. To the extent to which we attend to our being, we as ego will subside back into our being. When we attend to our being keenly enough, we will thereby subside and dissolve forever into our being. So the final and permanent dissolution of ego, that is the aim of self-investigation. How ego is dissolved is ego is a false awareness of ourself. Since it's a false awareness of ourself, it can be destroyed only by correct awareness of ourself. Correct awareness of ourself, what we actually are, is just pure awareness. So only by experiencing ourselves with pure awareness can we as ego destroy ourselves. So ego can never experience pure awareness because ego is the impure awareness I am. But though ego cannot experience pure awareness, ego must try to experience itself as pure awareness, because as soon as ego experiences itself as pure awareness, it ceases to be ego and remains as pure awareness. So this is how the dissolution of ego is brought about by the pure awareness, by ego experiencing itself as the pure awareness I am. That is why bringing about the dissolution of mind by any means other than self-investigation will result only in Manolaya. So sleep is a state of Manolaya. Sleep is brought about not by self-attentiveness, it's brought about because we're too tired to continue thinking, so we subside in sleep. Other states of Manolaya are, for example, a coma. If you have an accident or something happens and you go into a state of coma, that is brought about by some physical cause, either head injury or drug overdose or something has caused you, or some toxicity or something, you go into a state of coma. That is a state of Manolaya. General anesthesia is a state of Manolaya. As I say, drug overdoses can cause a state of Manolaya. In yoga, by means of pranayama and other yoga exercises, they bring about a state of Manolaya that is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But as Bhagavan said, it's only a state of Manolaya because if the mind subsides by restraining the breath, it will remain as if subsided, but sooner or later it will rise again and wander under the sway of its vasanas, as he says in the 8th paragraph of Nana. So by subsiding in Manolaya, whether you call it Nirvikalpa Samadhi or that is, the Manolaya is the same, whatever you call it. It's got different names according to how we go into that state. So if you go into that state through normal tiredness, we call it sleep. If you go into it through under the influence of anesthetic drugs, we call it general anesthesia. If you go into it by some other means, we call it coma. If you go into it by means of, deliberately by means of pranayama and other yoga exercises, it's called nirvikalpa samadhi. But essentially, they're all the same. They're all a temporary dissolution of mind. And in that temporary dissolution of mind, the vasanas are not weakened. We can weaken the vasanas only in waking and dream, because it's only in the waking and dream that we've risen as ego and come under the sway of our Vishaya vasanas. Since Vishaya vasanas are just inclinations, we have the freedom either to be swayed by them or not to be swayed by them. So moment to moment, so many, as Bhagavan says, Vishaya vasanas rise countless numbers like ocean waves. They're constantly rising in our mind. And we are constantly choosing which vasanas to be swayed by. So many inclinations are rising in our mind. We can follow this inclination or that inclination. And the inclinations we follow in our mind tend to lead to actions of speech and actions of body. So it's all, we have the freedom to be swayed or not swayed by any particular vasana.
This whole subject is enormously impressive and important, I think, and picking up on Lonnie's question there that you just answered so well. When we turn our attention away from ego to self, when we make that effort every day.
No. You can't turn, can you turn your attention away from the snake towards the rope?
What do you call it when a person purposely focuses just on self?
We call that turning away from phenomena back towards either ego or self. It makes no difference because they're one and the same thing.
Yeah. Well, my point...
to look carefully at the snake is to look carefully at the rope. It's one and the same thing.
But that thought comes from the ego state. I don't want to be in the ego state. I want to focus on myself.
But ego is the subject. All phenomena are objects. Our aim is to turn our attention away from the objects back towards the subject, away from the things that are known back towards the knower.
So maybe you already answered the question. How would we know that we are in genuine awareness of self and not just an intellectual awareness of it?
To the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we will cease to be aware of other things. But we will clear. This is the jnana marga, the path of awareness. Jnana means knowledge, but knowledge not in the sense of information, but knowledge in the sense of awareness. So this is the path of awareness. We are being aware of our own being. So it's, of course, if we subsided in the state of pure being, that would be the end. Ego would be finished. So during practice, we are coming close to being in that state of pure being. We're not perfectly in that state, but we will clearly recognize when we turn our attention back to ourselves that it can't be described in words, but there will be it's a state of clarity. And when our attention is diverted away towards anything else, we'll be equally aware of that. We'll be aware we've lost hold of that clarity and allowed ourselves to succumb to these thoughts. So the sign that we are not attending to ourselves, being aware of anything other than ourselves, is a sign that we're not attending to ourselves, or we're not attending to ourselves sufficiently keenly. The more keenly we attend to ourselves, the less we will be aware of anything other than ourselves. Anything other than ourselves means anything that appears or disappears, anything that changes, anything that is not permanent. What is permanent is only the fundamental awareness I am, which is our being.
Thank you.
But
I
it's
like
very
your way
difficult to put these things into words because words can only serve as pointers. We can understand what is self-investigation only by trying to put it into practice. The more we put it into practice, the clearer it will become to us what it is and what it is not.
I think it's a problem for a lot of people who know that they live in their brains and everything is seen through an intellectual prism. And to attempt to move out of ego into self or the awareness of self raises doubts. Am I actually there? And you just said, well, you come closer to it, which I
Yeah,
think is a
we're not actually there. If we were actually there, we'd be finished. But
would be
we are coming
finished.
close to it. We are
Yeah,
turning. That is the Bhagavan has given us a very, very precious clue. Doesn't matter what appears, to whom does it appear?
yeah.
So we need
This
to be
is excellent.
constantly turning our attention away from the things that appear, back towards ourselves, the one to whom it appears. And turning our attention towards ourselves, we can take it as we're turning it, when we say to whom it appears, that's ego, it appears to ego. But by attending to ego, we are actually attending to the underlying reality of ego, which is our being.
Right.
Just like we can't look at the snake without looking at the rope. The more keenly we look at the rope, sorry, the more keenly we look at the snake, the more keenly we're looking at the rope. And if we look at the snake keenly enough, we'll see, oh, it's not a snake, it's just a rope.
So we are tending to ourselves. We are growing closer to ourselves. Those are fine.
Yeah,
I'm glad I asked the question
yes,
because
yes.
that's helpful. We have doubts about everything, and
Yeah, well,
that's
yeah,
probably
it's natural. That is because this is a very simple path, but at the same time, a very deep and subtle path. So this is why clear understanding is necessary. If we don't clearly understand the process, we won't be able to put it into practice properly. We
yeah.
understand the process to a certain extent by reading Bhagavan's teachings carefully, thinking about them and making sense of them. Reading them carefully, attentively, is what is called sravana. Thinking about them deeply to make sense of them is what is called manana. That gives us a certain degree of clarity. But the real clarity will come only from the nididhyasa, from the actual practice. The more we practice it, the more clear it will become. But
Putting
we
them in the
can't even
correct
begin to practice it without having done sufficient sravana manana, because if we haven't understood the basics, we won't be practicing it properly.
yeah. Melissa's statement I read to you a few minutes ago. She's got a question, a follow-up
Can I just
question
say
to it.
one more thing on that?
Sure, go ahead.
Many people take they think the aim in self-investigation is to be without thoughts. But that is not the aim of self-investigation. That is the aim in yoga. Yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is restraining or stopping the chitta vrittis, the mental activity. That is not the aim in self-investigation. The aim in self-investigation is to know ourselves. And we can know ourselves only by attending to ourselves. But cessation of thought is a byproduct because to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego subside. When we subside, all our thoughts, all our mental activity will subside along with us. So chitta vritti nirodha, cessation of mental activity, is brought about by self-investigation as a byproduct. It's not the aim of self-investigation. If we make chitta vritti nirodha our aim, as in yoga, we will end up in Manolaya. That's why Bhagavan said, this is that we need to distinguish this merely stopping thoughts from this practice of self-investigation. To the extent to which we are self-attentive, to that extent the thoughts will reduce, but the thoughts will continue rising, or at least trying to rise, so long as we're practicing. That's why
Very
we
important
shouldn't take
distinction.
a state of a state of a lull of the mind. That is not self-investigation. Being without thoughts is not self-investigation. Attending to ourself alone is self-investigation.
Yeah. It's like a pathway to an investigation of who you really are.
Yeah,
Thanks for that distinction. I did not know that.
yeah.
Melissa, do you have your question ready?
Yes, I do. Can you
Great.
hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, hi. Um, Michael, thank you. This has been a very clarifying dialogue. And I probably already have the answer to this question, but I'll pose it in any case. So Ramana tells us when ego comes into existence, everything else comes into existence. But I know all that is real is Sat-chit, beingness, awareness, which is the I am that I really am, and that I know I am when I turn inward and look deeply into the I and see only being aware. So this is my question. The word for existence cannot be the same as the word for being or sat, because nothing can ever come into being, since being is the reality that always already is. So is it more accurate, just for my own understanding, to say when ego comes into appearance, when the jiva is very young and initially is in ignorance, and then confuses its awareness with the body, and eventually when the ego is shown when the jiva is shown the truth, either suddenly like Ramana or gradually through Sravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana, then the ego can disappear because it never was real at all.
Yeah.
And thereby body, mind, and world is known rightly to be like projections of Vishnu's dream.
Yes. Yes, what you say is correct. But that is ultimately, the words don't matter so much as understanding the words correctly. Bhagavan does say, for example, in verse 26 of Uludunapdu, it literally means if ego comes into being or into existence, it amounts to the same. Everything comes into existence or being. That's what it literally means. But you're right, that what is meant there, it comes into appearance. It seems to, that is, as Bhagavan often used to say, whatever exists at one time and not at another time doesn't even exist, even when it seems to exist. So real existence, real being is permanent. It's not something that comes and goes. So anything that comes into existence and goes out of existence doesn't actually exist at all. So going into existence or coming out of existence is what is otherwise called appearing. It's not real. It's a mere appearance, a mere seeming.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Michael. It may seem like I'm splitting hairs, but actually...
No, it's important to understand this. Bhagavan isn't saying that
Yes.
ego really comes into existence.
Yes,
He
yes.
says, that is, we need to understand from the context, the words he's using, but when he talks
Yes.
about something coming into being or coming into existence, that means appearing.
Appearance, yes, thank you. That the precision helps me to understand. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And we got still more.
And another important thing there, Bhagavan doesn't say when ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. He says if ego comes into existence. The very fact that he says if should make us stop and think, does it actually ever come into existence? It seems to have come into existence. As ego, we seem to be very real now, but if we investigate ourselves, we will find there's no such thing as ego at all. Ego never came into existence, and since ego never came into existence, nothing else came into existence. So the ultimate truth is ajata.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Marty, before we get to your question, we're going to Sri Ram, who's had his hand up. Sri Ram.
Michael, thank you very much. Namo Ramanaya.
Namo
Couple
Ramana.
quick questions. You mentioned that a witness is really the ego. Ego is the witness. And
Well,
so
it
this
depends on the
practice,
sense in which the term witness is used. If we're using the witness in the sense of the experiencer or knower, yes, it is ego.
right? So can you say that that's really the practice of witnessing, the practice of Sakshi Bhavana, in fact, might be counterproductive because you are emboldening and enhancing the ego.
Yes. Well, again, it's a matter of words, understanding what the words mean. Sakshi Bhavana means being detached, being as a mere being, because the word Sakshi is used, as Bhagavan clarified, it's used in two different senses. We can take Sakshi to mean the knower or the experiencer. That is ego. But the term Sakshi is also used to refer to Brahman. Brahman is sometimes referred to as Jiva Sakshi, the witness of a Jiva, or Sarva Sakshi, the witness of everything. That doesn't mean that Brahman is aware of Jiva or Brahman is aware of everything. Brahman is aware only of itself. But Brahman is the presence in which Jiva and everything else appear. So if the deeper sense in which Sakshi is used, it's referred, Bhagavan sometimes used to say, Sakshi means sanidhi. That's the deeper sense. So it doesn't mean knowing things, it means just being that presence.
That's
So,
beautiful because Sakshi will have to have something to witness to be a
well,
Sakshi.
that's how we normally take it, but that's not the sense in which it's often, in some cases it's used in that sense. When we talk about witness consciousness, generally what people mean by witness consciousness is the consciousness that is witnessing all this. So witnessing as a verb is definitely ego. The witness that is witnessing is ego. The witnessing that is just being without witnessing anything, that is Brahman. That is what we actually are.
So would you say that the deep sleep
So if
state
we
is
take Sakshi Bhava in the deeper sense, means just being as we actually are. But this
so are
term
we?
Sakshi Bhava is potentially misleading. It's confusing.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of confusion about this. So many people mistake Sakshi Bhavana to mean I will be the witness of everything. I witness everything. That's what we're doing all day. From the time we wake up in the morning to the time we go to sleep at night, throughout the waking state, throughout the dream state, we're constantly witnessing. This idea of being a detached witness, it may have some limited benefit in that if you're aware of yourself, I am not the doer of all these things, I'm just witnessing it, we can step back a little. But the idea of that is why we need to distinguish ourselves as the seer from everything that is seen is not just to continue seeing things, but to turn our attention back towards the seer. So
Yep.
what we should, if we want to witness something, we should witness the witness. Witness the witness, not the witnessed. We shouldn't be witnessing anything else. We should only be witnessing ourselves. In other words, we should be attending only to ourselves.
Michael, would you say that in deep sleep we are closer to the Jiva Sakshi or Shuddha Sakshi?
In deep sleep, we are as we actually are. Deep sleep is actually, this is another thing Bhagavan made clear, but many people don't understand this and they think that they object when we say this. Bhagavan made it clear, sleep is our pure state. Sleep is our real state. Why sleep seems to be defective is because from the perspective of ego in waking or dream, we seem to have come out of sleep. Because we've seemed to have come out of sleep, sleep seems to be a temporary state. As a temporary state, it's defective. So as one state among three, sleep is unreal. But the truth about sleep is actually it's the only real state. The truth is we've never come out of sleep. We are eternally sleeping. So that eternal sleep is what is called Turiya, the fourth. And as Bhagavan made clear, that though it's called the fourth, it's actually the only truly existing state. The other three are unreal. When we say the other three are unreal, that means if we take sleep to be one among three, then it's unreal. But sleep as it actually is the only real state.
That's awesome. Michael, two quick questions.
These are very subtle things. So people very quickly jump to conclusions without thinking carefully and making sense of these things. So that's why there are so many misunderstandings about what is the nature of sleep, what is meant by the term sakshi. And the trouble, as Bhagavan made clear, words will always be inadequate. At best, words can only point us in the right direction. But as Bhagavan also said, according to the purity of Yantakarana, the same teaching will reflect in different ways. So however perfectly Bhagavan expresses it in words, we will each understand according to our level of understanding. That's why he said the only perfect teaching is silence. And what he means by silence isn't just the absence of noise. Silence is our real nature. Silence is the nature of pure being. So because silence is the ultimate reality alone can reveal the ultimate reality. So what Bhagavan says, it seems very simple. It is very simple what he says, but it is very, very deep in meaning. So we have to have a very refined and subtle understanding to understand Bhagavan's words correctly. In order to understand Bhagavan's words correctly, we need a certain clarity of mind. And how do we get that clarity? Only by the practice of self-investigation. The more we turn our attention within and try to be as we actually are, the more we are, so to speak, bathing in clarity. Because the source of clarity is that fundamental awareness I am. So to the extent to which we attend to this fundamental awareness I am, to that extent we are bathing in the Ganga of clarity. The real Ganga, but will wash away all our sins, is only that clarity of pure awareness.
Ready for the next question?
So we don't need to go to Prayag and get caught in a crush of people to bathe in the Ganga. We need to turn within.
I was just there last week, Michael,
Yes.
in Kumbh Mela.
Right.
Quick follow-up, Michael. You have always mentioned that what is preordained is going to happen, and there's no real self-effort. Today you mentioned a little bit.
No, wait. What is going to happen is going to happen. I never said there's no such thing as self-effort. What is happening and what is going to happen is the result of the self-effort, the wrong self-effort we've made in the past.
Okay. So you mentioned that the option we have is to neglect the thoughts, not reduce the thoughts like yoga. So is that the self-effort that you're talking about? That's
forget about thoughts. Let any number of thoughts arise. So what? Bhagavan says, however many thoughts arise, so what? We shouldn't be bothered about thoughts, because if we're concerned about thoughts, our attention is on the thoughts. So he said, let any number of thoughts arise. As and when each thought rises, it's necessary to investigate to whom is it arisen.
But don't the new thoughts interrupt the stillness, Michael, in which
Of course, they will continue rising. That's what Bhagavan says. Vishaya vasanas rise in countless numbers like ocean waves. They're constantly rising. That's why we need to.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you say. Finish your question.
But in that stillness, that's the place where you're looking to find self, where you're inviting it, where you're investigating it.
Yes,
so
exactly.
They all are tied together. Thoughts mean no more stillness.
That is, the more we hold on to that our being, which is the true stillness, the more we hold on to our being, the more vigor with which the thoughts will rise, trying to divert our attention away from ourselves. How we deal with those thoughts is by not attending to them, by holding on to ourselves. The more we hold on to ourselves, the more we weaken the Vishaya Vasanas. That is, the thoughts are just a sprouted form of the Vishaya Vasanas. The Vishaya Vasanas sprout in the form of thoughts. If we allow ourselves to be diverted away from the self-attentiveness towards the thoughts, we are thereby giving strength to those Vishaya Vasanas. The more we cling to self-attentiveness and thereby refrain from being swayed by the Vishaya Vasanas, we weaken them.
Marty, you've got three long texts here, which are very interesting, followed by a question. Do you want to summarize it and ask Michael about this?
Okay, well, I guess the summarization is part of my question too. It has to do with what you talked about yesterday at the Houston group, Michael, about I think it was verse 26 and 27 in Anubandham. But I took this passage, and I think it came out of Yoga Vashishta, where it talks about playing joyfully in the world,
Yes.
devoid of desire,
Yeah.
devoid of detachment. Well, not devoid of detachment, but with detachment and desire as lessons. And what I kind of understand about this is that there's a sense of stillness and peace and true nature as our self or as I am, and it always existing, and that when we are active in the world, we're playing a role that here talks about being happy all the time or joyful, and that's not always possible, but yet the separation from self, I know self isn't aware of playing a role, but that role is, so it kind of looks like there's some multitasking going in here that's a little confusing to me.
Well, yes. That is, the thing is, this is where self-investigation comes in, because in self-investigation, by holding on to our being, we are separating ourselves from this person we seem to be. So the outward roles we have in life, whatever they may be, whether they're family roles or roles within groups of friends or roles within workplace or roles within society more generally, all these outward roles are played by whom? They're played by Marty or by Michael. Marty or Michael is not what we actually are. When we investigate ourselves, we are trying to hold on to our being, and by holding on to our being, we are separating ourselves from this person we seem to be. So the person we seem to be, let it continue playing its outward role. We are inwardly to be detached. That's what Bhagavan is emphasizing in those two verses, which, as you say, are from Yoga Vashishta, the translation of the instructions given by Vashishta to Rama in Yoga Vashishta. So it's not that we have to outwardly, that is, we can follow those verses only by being inwardly detached. If we are inwardly detached, the outward person that we seem to be will continue playing its roles in accordance with prarabdha.
Okay,
so it's that separation of ourselves from the person we seem to be. That is the key to understanding those verses and to putting them into practice.
So it's not necessary to try to be playful in all these activities?
No. And when
I mean,
like
it's saying, so it's
not exactly being playful. It's that is there. The word play means play as in like actors are playing on the stage. They're playing a role. So it's using the word play in a metaphorical sense of playing a role. It's a role play. But who is to play the role is not us. It's the person we seem to be. Let this person play whatever role it is destined to play. We have to separate ourselves and be detached.
And so that detachment also
So it's all a matter of identification. That's why yesterday I used the analogy of, this analogy which is often used, of the actor on the stage.
Mhm.
The actor is playing the role perfectly, but is not identified with that. The actor doesn't think I'm a king or I'm a beggar or I'm a villain or I'm a hero. The actor just acts the part, but they all know all along that that part they are acting is just a part, it's not them. Likewise, we can play our role perfectly in this world only by holding on to our own being. And thereby, the role that is to be played by this person we seem to be, that is already determined by prarabdha. So we need not interfere with that. We need not be concerned with that. We have to hold on to our own being, and then we will be perfectly following what Bhagavan teaches us in those two verses.
This is starting to sound too simple.
It is too simple. That's the trouble. As ego, we always want something complicated because in simplicity, there's no room for ego. Bhagavan's teachings are extremely simple.
Very good.
But their simplicity doesn't mean it's not a superficial simplicity. It's a very, very deep, profound, and subtle simplicity.
Well, it eliminates all the internal self-talk about what you should do and who should do it and what
Yeah,
needs
yeah,
to
yeah,
be
exactly,
done,
exactly.
and it all that goes away.
Bhagavan hasn't asked us to do anything. He's asked us just to be as we are. And he's shown us that in order to be as we are, we need to cease rising as ego. And in order to cease rising as ego, all we need to do is attend to ourselves. To the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we thereby subside. To the extent we subside, we remain as we actually are.
Is that it?
I've had this passage for like 10 years now here on my computer, and it's just every time I stumble across it, I just love it. So I thought I'd bring it up today.
Yeah,
Thanks, Marty.
right.
We have two more people online, Michael, and I'll get to Bruce as soon as we touch with Steve. Steve, you had a comment in the chat box. Sleep as it actually is the only real state. Do you want to expand on that?
Well, I think that's
I just heard Michael say it, and when you said it, as sleep as one of three states is unreal, but sleep as it actually is the only real state. When I heard it, I'd never heard that before, and for some reason it seemed to pierce through, and that's why I wrote it down, just because as you said it,
yes,
this was fresh news to
yes,
me.
yes.
And I don't know if there's anything to expand or you've said it all.
But I think I've said it, but I can just say again, that is sleep from the perspective of ego in waking and dream, sleep seems to be a defective state because it's a temporary state. Anything that is temporary is not real. So from the perspective of ego in waking and dream, sleep seems to be a temporary state and therefore defective and unreal. But it's only from the perspective of ego in waking and dream that sleep seems to be temporary. Actually, sleep is our eternal state. But so long as we experience sleep as one state among three, we have to say it's unreal because it's temporary and therefore unreal. But what is unreal is what sleep seems to be rather than what sleep actually is. What sleep actually is our eternal state of Satchit, pure being awareness. I am, nothing other than I am.
Okay, Steve.
I'm sure that brings up other questions, but I know other people want to go on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Thank you.
That is, Bhagavan has, that all these things have been talked about since the time of the Upanishads. Some 3,000 years ago, people were talking about these things, writing about these things. But Bhagavan has brought a fresh clarity to all these things. But the clarity is a very deep and subtle clarity. So many people fail to recognize the great contribution Bhagavan has made in clarifying all these things.
Bruce, take it away. What's up with you?
Just two comments, and in the form of a comment question. The column of fire is a role, for example, that Shiva manifested as, and the subdued mountain of light is a variation of that same role.
Yes,
Just
but how does Shiva play all his roles? Does he do anything? According to Bhagavan, he doesn't do anything. He plays all his roles just by being as he is. This is what Bhagavan talks about in the 15th paragraph of Nana. All the so-called divine functions of creation, sustenance, dissolution. That is, the world is created, it's sustained, and it's eventually dissolved. These three are three divine functions. The other two divine functions are Tirodhana and Anugraha. Tirodhana means veiling. That is, if it wasn't for this veil of ignorance, we wouldn't, this world wouldn't seem to exist at all. So that veiling is also, so long as we want to be in ignorance, so long as we're enjoying this state, so long as we have so many desires and ambition, he graciously keeps us veiled. He saves us from liberation by allowing us to remain in moksha, in samsara. But then when we understand the futility of all these things, that we can never attain the happiness we're seeking in this world, then we begin to long for something beyond all this. That is where anugraha comes in. Anugraha means grace.
Grace,
The
right.
etymological meaning of anugraha is anu means coming after. Graha means grasping. So God has to come after us and grasp us to save us. So even when we are wallowing in the ignorance, in the samsara, even when we're enjoying the samsara and having so many desires and ambitions and everything, even then grace is working. But finally, the grace gives us the clarity to understand we are not going to attain the happiness we're seeking in this world. We can attain it only within. Then the grace, we become aware of the functioning of grace and we try to yield ourselves to it. But all these five divine functions, creation, sustenance, dissolution, veiling, and grace, all of these, how do they happen? Bhagavan says, they all happen isan sanidana visesha matratal. That means by the mere special nature of the presence of God.
Right.
The presence of God means the being of God, because God's being is itself infinite love. That infinite love is what makes everything happen as it's meant to happen, and what eventually will save us by giving us the love to be as we actually are.
Right.
So he has a role. In our view, not in his view. In
our view,
in his view, his only role is to be. But in our view, he has a role to create, sustain,
annihilate,
dissolve, veil, and bestow grace. All these in our view.
Yeah.
But he does all these not by doing anything, but just by being as he is.
Right. But it appears in the jiva's eyes as a doing.
Yeah, exactly. God does everything without ever doing anything.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Michael.
Right.
That was beautiful.
And Michael, real quickly, I've asked you this before and you've always given a satisfactory answer. When you say God and you refer to him as he, it's sort of, well, it's dualistic. It's outside. When in reality, the God and the he you're referring to is self, which is real.
It's our own being.
Not
but
outside.
When we rise as ego, we have seemingly separated from God. Is infinite being, infinite awareness, infinite happiness, infinite love. When we rise as ego, we seem to be something other than that. Do you feel your being is infinite? No, I was born just a few years ago, and in a few years' time, I'm going to die. So my being is limited in time. I'm also exist only here. I'm here in Scotland, not there in San Diego. So we're limited in time and space. Our being is limited. Our awareness is limited. We know some things, we don't know other things. So we seem to have limited awareness. Our happiness is limited. Sometimes we're a little bit happy, sometimes we're a little bit unhappy. So we are fluctuating between the two. And our love, we like some things, we dislike other things. So all these limitations we impose upon ourselves by rising as ego. Having risen as ego, we seem to be something other than that infinite whole. But of course, nothing can be other than the infinite, because if we were actually other than God, then God would thereby be limited. There would be God and not God. So what we actually are is nothing but God, but we seem to be something other than God so long as we rise as ego. Yeah. So long as we rise as ego, God seems to have a role. His primary role, his ultimate role is anugraha, running after us to save us from ourselves.
Yes, God does seem to have a role. Very good. Thank you for that added clarification. Melissa, you're next. You are a second ahead of Ronnie raising your hand. Go ahead, Melissa.
Okay. Well, this is a kind of an odd question and maybe just a hypothetical. So I completely understand when you say that the true sleep, the eternal sleep, is our only real state, the turiya. And that is clearer now than ever before. So here is a kind of a hypothetical. When we seem to be born into this realm of jivas, then we emerge from the sleep which we were in utero.
Yes.
And we emerge into a waking state where our awareness immediately starts to conflate itself with our bodies.
Yes.
And thus another jiva seems to be created.
Yeah.
And so it appears that to me that the path of Ramana is to turn inward, and this realm of jivas becomes more and more distant.
Yes. The more we turn within, the more we separate ourselves from this this jiva. Or jiva is a synonym for ego. So it's not that ego comes into being at the time of birth. Ego is it's ego that has projected all of this.
Yes.
But the power by which it has projected all of this, that is God.
Yes.
So it is misusing, that is
Yeah.
God's power. God is one and his power is one. But his power appears to us in two forms. On the one hand, Maya, on the other hand, grace.
Grace. Yes.
They're actually one and the same power. But when we misuse that power, we experience it as Maya. When we stop misusing it by yielding ourselves back to it, it becomes clear that it is grace. So Maya and grace are one and the same power. It's just two ways of seeing the same power. And how we see it is up to us.
Yes. Do we turn it outward or do we turn it inward?
Exactly.
Yes,
so long as we are using our power of attention, which is chit shakti, which is that power of grace, so long as we are turning it outwards, we experience it as Maya. When we turn it within, we experience it as grace.
Thank you again. Thank you.
And Ronnie, you're next.
Thank you, Ted and Michael, for taking my question. So Turiya is the ground state which is there, whether we are awake or we are sleeping, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in the deep sleep state, there is no identification of even the sense of I am.
I am is not an identification. I am is our being.
Okay. So there is
I am
no...
this or that is an identification.
Correct.
So that identification is the nature of ego. Ego is abhimanam. It is always identifying itself as I am this or I am that. The pure I am is just pure being. It's not, there's no identification there.
So in deep sleep, I'm not even aware of being.
You are.
It's only when I get up and say, oh yeah, I had a deep sleep. But in deep sleep itself.
Okay, this is where we need to, this is a very deep and subtle point, and it's a very important point to understand. From the perspective of ego in waking and dream, sleep seems to be a state of non-awareness. The reason for this is we, in the waking and dream state as ego, we associate awareness with transitive awareness. We take being aware of things, we take that to be awareness. When it's a state of, the state of pure awareness seems to ego to be a state of ignorance because there's no awareness of anything in pure awareness. But sleep is, as Bhagavan said, sleep is, it's very clearly recorded in Maharsha's Gospel in one place. Bhagavan says this, sleep is not ignorance, it is our pure state. There's total ignorance in waking and dream. There's full awareness in sleep. So the awareness I am is eternal. Are we not all clearly aware I slept? We all know, but we were in a state in which we weren't aware of anything. So that
but Michael,
shows, but we cannot be aware of having been in that state if we were not aware of being in that state when we were being in that state. But of course, in that state, we weren't thinking this is a state devoid of awareness. It was a state just of pure I am.
So I was thinking, is that the real Shiva? Because you don't have a form, you don't have an identification, you have complete dissolution.
Yes, yes, yes. Why do we worship Shiva in the form of a linga? The linga is a very abstract form. What the linga represents is formlessness. It's a form to represent formlessness. So Shiva, the principal form in which Shiva is worshipped, is in the form of linga, because Shiva is formless. And the original linga, the Adi Linga Swarupa, is Arunachala. So Arunachala is the form of formlessness. It is the form assumed by that which is eternally formless, to remind us of that ground, that adhishtanam, that adhara, which is Shiva, the base, the screen on which everything appears, the ground on which we are all these egos are dancing.
But when I wake up and say I had a good sleep, that's identification, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because, but the funny thing is, the I that says I slept well is ego. But ego actually didn't exist at all in sleep, because ego is a combination of two things. It's a combination of the pure I am and the whatever adjuncts it's conflated with. So what exists in sleep is not ego as ego, but ego as pure awareness. So it's true in a way when we say, I slept well, but what slept well is not ego, is not this ego in the form of ego, but ego in the form of, in its original form of pure awareness, which is Shiva.
So Michael, I sleep a lot, and that's almost 10 hours a day. So I'm in a state of turiya for 10 hours, which means that I'm responsible.
In turiya, there is no time. There is no going and it hokum varavamil, as Bhagavan says in Akrama, it's devoid. Pocum varum, he describes it beautifully in Akramai. Pocum varavum il poduveli, that common space, that open space, which is devoid of coming and going. That is Turiya.
Right.
So, but that's
So
why
I'll
I
just
say,
reduce my
from the
karmic
perspective
load.
of ego in waking and dream, sleep seems to be a defective state, because it seems to be a state in which we go into and come out of. So sleep is actually the eternal state in which there's no coming and going. We have never come out of sleep. That is the absolute truth. But so long as we've risen as ego, we seem to have come out of that state. That's why we need to investigate ourselves. When we investigate ourselves, we will merge back into that pure being, which is what is otherwise called Turiya, and then it will be clear, but we have never risen. That is the state of ajata. The state in which we have never risen is the state in which nothing has ever risen. So call it ajata, call it Turiya, call it waking sleep, call it Brahman, call it Atma-swarupa, whatever it is. Call it I am. I am is the most direct way. That is what we actually are. That alone is what is real. That is God, that is Shiva, that is Vishnu, that is Brahma, that is Guru, that is everything.
So in that state of deep sleep, there is nothing. And that's what you're referring to as
nothing.
ajata.
There is the only
There
thing.
is something.
No, there is the only thing.
There's the only thing, okay.
And you are that, Tattvamasi.
Yeah, from a relative awake, the body awake state or the I awake state, it seems nothing, but that's the in totality of what we are.
It's the fullness of Satchidananda.
Okay.
Infinite
Thank you very
being,
much.
infinite awareness, infinite happiness, infinite love.
Thank you, Ronnie. Moving on, we got 3 things left. Sri Ram, I'll get to you right after I mention the one-liners that were texted in the chat box from Barnath. Then what knows I'm sleeping? That's a question mark after it. And then Melissa says, true pure awareness never sleeps. It is always only itself being. The mind goes to sleep, Manolaya, and then pure awareness shines.
It is always wakefully asleep. Or it is sleepfully awake, whatever way we call it. It is beyond the distinction between waking and sleep. That's why it is called Jagrat Sushupti, wakeful sleep. It's the state in which we are asleep to all phenomena, eternally asleep to all phenomena, and eternally awake to our own being. And sorry, what was the previous question?
And then what knows I'm sleeping? Yes.
What knows? Nothing knows I'm sleeping, because what exists in sleep is only I am, and I am knows nothing other than I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's only after waking up that we said, I was sleeping. What knows I was sleeping is ego. What knows I am is only I am.
And it makes a judgment on how well or how poorly that sleep went.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Sri Ram, we're almost out of time.
Okay.
What's your
Beautiful. Michael, now all this great theory, and the bottom line that you gave us, Anugraha Shakti, and you said that without love, there is no transition from Vishaya Vasana to Sadvasana.
Yeah.
And without that transition in turning inward from Vishaya Vasana, outer world, to inner self, there's no victory, there's no gaining of pure state. Now, this love, is that a grace of God? And if so, of course it is. How do we cultivate that? How do we develop and nurture this love?
Grace is nothing but the infinite love. But God is ourself as we actually are. Let's say Bhagavan. But Bhagavan is a particularly, God somehow seems a bit distant, but Bhagavan is Bhagavan is a very intimate term. So let's say Bhagavan. Bhagavan knows us as himself. He doesn't see us as anything other than himself. Because he knows us as himself, he loves us as himself. And his love is infinite. So the infinite love that Bhagavan, who is ourself as we actually are, has for us. And oh, another thing, he because he doesn't see us as other than himself, he doesn't love us as the person that we seem to be. He loves us as we actually are. He loves us as himself, because what we actually are is himself. So the infinite love that he has for us as himself is what we experience as his grace. And his grace kindles in us the love, a response to his love. That when we recognize the love that he has for us, that kindles in our heart the love for him. So, but whatever love we have, whatever bhakti we have, is entirely a product of his grace. It's his grace that has lit this spark of bhakti in our heart. It is the work of grace that has lit this fire to feed the fire and to finally consume everything in that fire. But though it's entirely the work of grace, we have an important role to play. We have to yield ourselves to that. Because so long as we're rushing outwards, we are saying no thank you. We don't want grace. That going outwards is turning our back on grace. It is refusing the grace that is ever available. So if we really want grace, we need to yield ourselves to it. As Bhagavan said, the grace is always pulling us within. But if we're always rushing outwards, we're resisting that pull of grace. So we have to yield ourselves to the pull of grace by trying our best to turn within. The more we try to turn within, the more we are subsiding, and then thus the less we are resisting that pull of grace. So as we subside more, the pull becomes stronger. And as the pull becomes stronger, we subside more. But ultimately, it is all the work of grace. Our only role is to yield ourselves, surrender ourselves to that grace. And we can surrender ourselves to that grace only by ceasing to rise as ego. Because rising as ego is the rejection of grace. So in order to cease rising as ego, we need to hold on to our being. It's as simple as that. But it's not, ultimately, it's not what we do. It's all done by grace. Even the love to hold on to our being comes only from grace. But to the extent possible, we need to cooperate with grace by yielding ourselves to it, by holding on to our being. That's why Bhagavan often said, grace is ever available. It's ever shining in our heart as I am. It's never the case that God is ungracious to us. We are ungracious to God by rejecting his grace, by turning outwards, by rising as ego.
That's very, very beautiful, Michael. Very, very beautiful.
So if we want to pray for grace, the greatest prayer for grace is to turn within and hold firm to our being. That is the true prayer.
Thank you. Michael, we're almost out of time. It's a coin toss as to whether or not I actually get to the second question of those who wrote into us from Sina, which is brief. If you want to try to attempt to answer it now in 5 minutes, or would you like to hold that next week?
Okay, yeah. Let's try.
It'd be good to have two questions from the people who take the time to send them to us. Sina writes, what is there to investigate, Michael, once one abides as pure knowledge, as pure self? It's only empty, correct? It's only full of itself, correct? Am I right or wrong thinking this way?
Okay. He said, what is there to investigate once one abides as pure knowing? Pure knowing means pure awareness. Knowing anything other than ourselves is not pure knowing. That is pure ignorance. So pure knowing means the pure awareness I am. Abiding as that means being that. Being that is itself investigating that. I was asked, I can't remember exactly what the question was, but there's some question arose yesterday in the meeting with Houston. It was something about, I think it was there, if I remember correctly. Very recently, I was talking about this. That is, when we're investigating who am I, we're investigating our being. How can we investigate our being other than by being our being? Our being is not an object that we can investigate. We can investigate our being only by being. By being as we actually are, we are thereby investigating being. Bhagavan indicates this in verse 27 of Ulladu Narpadu. What he says in verse 27 of Ulladu Narpadu, in the first sentence he says, Nanu diada ullanile, namaduvai ullanile. That means the state in which I is without rising is the state in which we are that. That is, the I that is pure being. That's the real, the pure I am. The I that rises is ego, the adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body. So long as we rise as ego, of course, we always, being is that we couldn't rise without being. So being is the ground, the adhisthana, the adhara, the base on which everything happens. But so we couldn't rise without being. But so long as we are rising, we are not aware of ourselves as pure being. So the state in which I is without rising, he puts it so beautifully, is the state in which we are as that. That here means Brahman. So it is said, Tattvamasi, you are that. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. But what is that state referring to? It's not referring, ego is not that. That is, as ego, we seem to be something other than that. But the reality of ego is the pure being, which is that. So just by being as we actually are, without rising as ego, that is, to be as we actually are, being as we actually are, just being, summa iruptu, means not rising as ego. So not rising as ego is itself being as that, as Brahman, as what we actually are. So how to be without rising as ego? It's the question the obvious question we have to ask. Bhagavan answers that in the next sentence of that verse. Wait a second, I'll just get the verse. He says, Nanodikum tanamade nadamol, nanudia tanirape savdu evan. This is a very, very important sentence. It's one of the most important sentences in the whole of Ulladu Narpadu. Without, it literally means, without investigating the place where I rises, how to reach the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise. So what does he mean by this? The place where I rises, he uses the word place, Bhagavan often uses the word place in a metaphorical sense. So the place where I rises is the source from which we've risen as ego. The source from which we've risen as ego is our own being. So investigating the place where I rises means investigating our being. In other words, turning our attention back within to attend to ourself alone. And he says, without doing that, without investigating the place where I rises, that means without attending to ourself, how to reach the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise. That is, we cannot, the nature of ego, as Bhagavan made clear in verse 25, which I was talking about earlier, verse 25 of Ulladu Narpadu, the nature of ego is to rise, stand and flourish, grasping form. Grasping form means attending to things other than itself. But if instead of grasping form, if we try to grasp ourselves, if we try to grasp our own being, what happens? Tedinal otum pidicum. If seeking, that means if investigating our own being, if seeking to know what we actually are, we will thereby take flight, we'll run away. In other words, we'll subside and dissolve back into our source. So turning our attention back to ourselves is turning our attention away from ourselves towards anything other than ourselves is the means by which we rise and flourish as ego. Turning our attention back towards ourselves is the means by which we subside and dissolve back into our source. So without investigating the place where I rises, in other words, without investigating our own being, without attending to I am alone, how to reach the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise. The annihilation of oneself obviously means the annihilation of ego. So it's only when Bhagavan talks about the state in which I does not rise, he's talking about the state, not just a temporary, sleep is a state in which I does not rise, but sooner or later it rises again. So when he talks about the state in which I does not rise, he means the state in which I permanently is without rising. It permanently is without rising. That is what he refers to here as taniripe, the annihilation of oneself. So in order to be as we actually are, we need to investigate ourselves. We need to investigate our being. By investigating our being, by attending to our being, we thereby subside into our being. So the answer to the question, what is there to investigate once one abides as pure knowing means pure awareness, when we remain as pure awareness, that is itself investigating pure awareness. And by investigating pure awareness, ego dissolves and we remain permanently. We abide permanently as pure knowing, as the pure awareness I am. Knowing other things is not pure knowing. Because knowing other things, we can't know something without, when we know one thing, previously we didn't know it, afterwards we're not going to know it. So that is knowledge and ignorance, as Bhagavan says in verses, point out in verses 10, 11, 12, and 13 of Uludunapadu, knowledge and ignorance of other things, they're a dvandva, a pair of opposites. So one cannot exist without the other. But the real awareness is the state that is devoid of both knowing and not knowing. So that the pure knowing is devoid of both knowing and not knowing. To be as that, in order to be as that, we need to turn our attention back to that. We need to attend to that. By attending to that, we subside and remain as that. So the investigation, that is the investigation. So being that is both the path and the goal. Our aim is to be as we actually are. In order to be as we actually are, we need to be as we actually are. As Bhagavan says in one verse of Guru Vachaka Kovai, Upayamum tane, upayamum tane, abedama kangai ave. That means the goal is only oneself. The means is only oneself. Know these two to be non-different. So we are self of a path, we are self of a goal. So being as we actually are, being as the pure being awareness I am, that is our goal, and that is the path to attain that goal. So we can investigate our being only by being our being. And then is it empty? No, it's not. It's devoid of all unreal things, but it's the fullness of what is real, the fullness of itself. So emptiness is, the concept of emptiness is possible only if you've got more than one thing. If you've got more than one thing, you can say one thing is in the other thing, or it's not in the other thing. If it's not in the other thing, then the other thing is empty. But in a state beyond two-ness, in a state of non-duality, how can there be emptiness?
Exactly.
So it is the fullness of what alone is. The fullness of Sat, the fullness of Chit, the fullness of Ananda, the fullness of Ambu, the fullness of being, the fullness of awareness, the fullness of happiness, and the fullness of love.
What you see as nothing is actually everything.
Yes.
Michael, thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. It's been a very fast 2 hours. One point of correction here, not correction, one point of clarification, if I can get it from you quickly. At the beginning of this answer to the last question today, you said abiding that is being that. Okay, so we've heard that in many forms of expression
Yeah.
before. My question is, so instead of saying, I am abiding as the self, I am abiding in the self, isn't it more efficient to simply say, I am self?
Isn't it more efficient to say I am?
Or I am?
Yes.
Yes.
What
Or I.
I am myself. Is
Yeah.
that's a tautology? How can we be anything other than ourselves? We are always ourselves.
Adding the word abiding to me, maybe it's because of my understanding of abiding, and you clarified it there,
Yeah.
seems to weaken it a little bit with an artificial.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But words always have their limitations. We need to see beyond the words, what the words are pointing at. But rather than saying I am myself, Bhagavan says I am I. Why does Bhagavan say I am I? Because if to identify ourselves with anything other than ourselves is a false identity. We cannot be anything other than ourselves. So Bhagavan expresses that as I am I. Aham aham, nan nan.
Thank you. Thank
What
you
we
for
actually are is only I and nothing other than I.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for all the time you gave us today and for all the years you've been with us. There's the old saying that time flies by. To me, Christmas was yesterday, New Year's was yesterday. Tomorrow we'll see you next in March.
Yes. And
So-
one thing we should never forget, we're all getting older. So time is going fast. Very soon the end is coming. So are
That's
we
a lot
ready
to
for
do.
that?
Thank you, Michael. What a wonderful day, and have a great rest of your Sunday evening there. And we'll see everybody next week who shows up. Thank you.